Hello folks, today we're doing AQA Language Paper 1 front to back in its entirety. I'm going to talk you through all 5 of the questions, the approach to all 5 of them, and give you the tips and structures and advice that will get you full marks. Quite simply, if you do everything I'm about to say to you, you will not only pass, but I've had students get grades 7s, 8s and 9s following the exact strategies that I'm going to share with you. Okay, so let's get to it. The English GCSE is lovely in a way that we know what the questions are going to be, we know the structures before we go in there. The only thing that changes is the text. And the text we're looking at is one from the woman in black. So, let's get some headlines going. This is paper 1 of 2, so it's 50% of your English language GCSE. It is bang down the middle in terms of the marks available. It's 80 marks here, it's 80 marks in paper 2. You've got an hour and 45 minutes to get as many of those marks as possible. And as I say, there's 80 marks available. If you want to know how that breaks down into your grades, well, here we go. You only need 8 of them if you want to get a grade. If you want to get a pass though, because the last time there was proper exams, it was needed 38 marks for you to get a pass. Those out there who have got ambitions looking at the very top, there we go, look where we need to be getting to for them. Okay? This is just for paper 1. Remember, you'd have to get the same again in paper 2 for you to reach that top mark. Okay? This is beautiful in that we know what the questions are going to be. The questions will be on these particular elements, and it is always worth bearing in mind how much these are weighted for your whole GCSE. For example, there are so many students that panic and stress about question 3, the structure question. Oh my god, it's only worth 5% of your GCSE. It's only 5%. Stop stressing about it. Your evaluation, which is worth 12.5%, yeah, you won't stress about that one. That's something we need to get right, okay? So it's always worth bearing that in mind, and that shapes the timings that I'm going to talk to you about today, okay? So, what do you actually need to do? There are some teachers that will talk about going in reverse, or doing this question and doing that question. In collaboration with AQA, because I worked very closely with the folks who wrote this exam in a past life, the exam is shaped the way it is for a deliberate reason. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 to help you and support you. First of all, you're asking about wants you to extract information about what the text is about, what's actually going on. That's going to let you then be able to analyse the methods the writer has used to communicate meaning, both in terms of language, structure and then evaluation. The final part of the exam is actually then turning it on its head, going the other way round, and actually it is you then applying the methods to communicate your own meaning. If you go hoggledy-piggledy, or you go back to front, you are literally making it hard on yourself, because the hardest skill you are then going to be taking your time with, and therefore you're not going to do as well with it because you haven't been scaffolded up to succeed within it. AQA intends you to go 1 to 5, that's what I would do. Before we get on to the nitty-gritty of each question, it is worth looking at the mark scheme, okay? Now at the top of each of the mark schemes of all of the questions, question 5 is slightly different but similar sort of idea, but we've got these 2 bands. Now level 3 is not grade 3, level 3 is the folks between half marks and 3/4 marks. These are the folks that are getting their grades 4s, 5s and 6s, okay? To get there, they need to be making points that are clear and relevant. Relevant means they are linked back to the question and linked back to the effects of the method all the way through. And clear means they are very, very understandable, no ambiguity, the examiner knows exactly what you're talking about. The top band is for folks that are perceptive and detailed. Well, perceptive, that means points that are unique to you, that only you could make, they're original ideas. And detailed, that means they've obviously gone further, they've gone beyond the first point, they've gone past the first initial idea, okay? I'm going to show you now 3 principles that are going to help you get all of these. And these 3 principles run throughout language paper 1 and throughout language paper 2. Okay? Principle number 1. Everybody loves cake. But the cakes we prefer are the ones that have got lots and lots of layers. We don't want cakes that have just got one single layer and therefore are rubbish. We want cakes that have got layers of ideas, one on top of each other. That's the way we're going to approach our English language. Okay? Principle number 2. Cake is very simple to make really. Apart from a few other bits and pieces, it involves some egg, some sugar and some flour. But if I follow my recipe wrong and I put the wrong amount of eggs in, or I put the wrong amount of flour in or sugar in, my cake goes wrong and it goes peak time. Our English language is exactly the same in that the three things that we need are our focus, our effect, and our link. And every single layer, every single one of our layers has to have those three ingredients within it. Because if there's ever a time where I'm missing one of those ingredients, that layer goes to pot. And I'm going to show you and model how these work lots and lots and lots in a minute. Essentially, time and again, we're identifying the method that's been used, either structurally or in terms of language. We talked about the effect of it, so what it's actually doing, and then we've linked it back to the topic. The last principle is to do with the language methods that we're going to be talking about. I teach my students there are 4 groups of methods, these ones here on the board. Now these 4 methods, groups of methods, are really important because depending what the method is the specific effect that the writer has therefore tried to create. If they have chosen, for example, a particular piece of figurative language, they've done that to put an image in the reader's head. If they've chosen a particular piece of alliteration, it's because of the sound that it creates. Now, I haven't got time in this little video here to go through the specifics of these and what I actually mean. I strongly recommend that you go and have a little look at this video here, Bossing Language Methods. Click on there because then it's going to talk you through those 4 groups, the 4 specific terms that go with each of those groups, how to effectively bring in that effect so that you are precise and specific. This here is how you may avoid being that generic person that says it makes it stick in the reader's head or it gives it attention. This is how you get precise and effective analysis to get into those top marks. So, if we do those 3 principles, that allows us to hit all our mark scheme. Our focus, effect, link is letting us link everything back to the topic, and it's making our points nice and clear. If we layer up our ideas and layer up beyond just a single point, well, that means we're giving a more thoughtful, more detailed argument. And if we are offering more layers, it gives us far more chance to make a point that is unique and original to us. Okay, so 3 principles to take you to the top of the mark scheme. Now then, let's get to it. First of all, before we get onto our questions, we need to read our text. And it is so important that when we read our text, we read it properly. We don't just read it once, do question 1, read it again, do question 2, read it again, do question 3. We haven't got time. We do not have time to do that. So, when you first read it, it's really important that you squeeze everything out of it at the first instance. You know question 2 and 4 is going to ask you about rich techniques. That's those devices, that alliteration, those sentence choices, those rich word choices. So as you see them for the first time, highlight them because you're going to need them in question 2 and question 4. You're also going to need to talk about how you as a reader, how your thoughts shift and change when you get to question 3. So as you're reading it, you're thinking, how am I thinking? How am I feeling? How do I feel about this character? When am I shifting and when am I changing? Okay? Question 1 is meant to be getting you on the dance floor. It is not meant to catch you out. It is 4 marks and the intention is that everyone in the country starts question 2 on 100%, on 4 marks. Okay? There are a few things you need to just double check though. This is your order. This is what you've got to do first. Number 1, check the lines in the right place because they may be crafty. This is lines 1 to 4. If you've taken it from line 5, you get no marks. Number 2, underline the focus of the question. This one specifically wants to know about the dog called Spider and his behaviour or her behaviour. So make sure all your points are to do with the dog Spider. Now the best way of doing that is by starting each of your lines with the focus of the question. So if the question is about the dog, you start the dog, the dog, the dog, the dog. A little bit repetitive, but if someone had just put black fur, the examiner might be like, what the hell's got black fur got to do with anything? There is chances where what you've put is too vague to give you the mark. So don't make that mistake. Don't fall into that trap. Start the dog, the dog, the dog, the dog, and then put what you're going to say about it. Okay? Check before you move on that all these points are different, they are relevant, and that they are from the right section. Because if there's any repetition or anything like that, they're going to take marks off you, and that would be pants. Okay? Question 2. Question 2 looks like this then. This is our language analysis question. It will give you a little intro telling you which parts of source we're talking about, and then it will give you a little rich extract. Okay? First of all, underline the focus of the question. So all of our points need to come back to this, the atmosphere in this case. Second of all, you now need to find your rich quotes. Don't spend hours trying to find quotes that no one else will say. Your marks are not for that. Your marks are for the quality of the analysis. Okay? So, I'm reading. I sat up paralysed, frozen in the bed, conscious only the dog. Well, I'm having that. That is a rich quote, and I don't care if it's the first one I see. I'm going to absolutely obliterate my analysis for that, layer upon layer upon layer. Okay? I'll put it here a bit bigger for you so you can see. I've got here my plosives, I've got here my metaphors. He's not actually paralysed. You don't sit up in bed and become paralysed. He's not actually frozen. He's not a block of ice. So we've got plosives, we've got metaphors, we've got our noun, the dog. Of all the things in the world, he calls a dog. Okay? Well, we're going to talk about that. And then we've got our complex sentence with lots and lots of punctuation, making it very slow and disjointed. So my one quote here, that yeah, I'm sure lots of other folks are going to pick, they're not going to unpack it 4 layers deep the way you might if you follow these strategies. Okay? Next up then, now we come to doing our writing. Now before we start writing our paragraphs of analysis, we have to do a little introduction. Now this is a grade 7+ skill because this is where you talk about how language combines together and works together. If you're a student who just goes, here's a metaphor, this is what it does, here's alliteration, this is what it does, and treats them all as separate little islands, the examiner is not going to give you the mark that you are potentially capable of getting. Okay? So, one sentence introduction, it looks like this. Okay? I start with the writer, always start with the writer, always, always, always. It shows the examiner that it is a craft of the writer, a creation of the writer, and then the detail that comes after it, you are talking about how that language works together to create a particular effect. Okay? Once you've got your introduction, now you're ready to do your write-up. Okay? Now, very, very simple. First of all, make a point. The point needs to establish the method. It could be as simple as this. Hill uses figurative language. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. There's no bonus marks for Hill skillfully uses a combination of blah blah blah. No extra marks. Hill uses a number of language devices, including you ain't got time. You ain't got enough ink in your pen. You ain't got enough time on the clock. Hill uses figurative language. Bish bash bosh. Then put your evidence. There's your rich quote. The quote that we talked about earlier on. The quote that is quite simple, but there's loads for me to say about it. So I've got my point and I've got my evidence. Now I come to my explanation. Okay? Now, my explanation is going to be in layers, like that cake, as I said. And every one of them layers has got a focus, an effect, and a link. And all I'm going to do is knock off those methods, those language methods, one at a time. Focus, effect, link, focus, effect, link, focus, effect, link, focus, effect, link. Hill's use of the metaphor paralysed creates an image of an incurable physical limitation, reflecting how he's powerless to do anything about his fear. I've colour-coded it for you. So we've got the focus, we've got the effect, and then we've linked it back to the topic. If I know these 4 words, and if I know these 4 kind of roots of the effect, this is a walk in the park for me. Because I'm going metaphor, what's the image I associate with metaphor? Paralysed. What do I think of when I think of someone who's paralysed? What does that therefore tell me about the guy in this text? Okay? Then I go layer 2. I've just drawn the line so it's nice and clear for you. But look, exactly the same again. Focus on paralysis, effects, this is what it makes me think of, link it back to the topic. And again, focus on the other metaphor, frozen, this is the effect of it, it's what it made me think of, this is how it links back to the topic. And again, now I'm going to talk about sentences. I've talked about figurative language 3 times, let's talk about something different. Let's talk about the sentence, let's talk about the effect of the sentence in regards to the pace, and then link it back to the topic. If you know your focus, effect, link, and if you know these things here, that is a doddle. If you're looking at that and thinking, that's too much, mate, I ain't got a clue what's going on there, watch that video on bossing methods, because that is well within the reach of every single person who wants to learn it and wants to get a good mark in English. Okay? The examiner is loving this. The examiner is loving this, okay? And the reason why the examiner is loving it is because someone is considered beyond the first impression. How many times are people going to say, oh, paralysed means they're disabled? Think deeper, think more specific. He's paralysed, he's got an incurable physical limitation, so therefore he's powerless to do anything about his fear. He's incurable, he can't do anything about it, it makes him vulnerable. Go beyond the first interpretation. Look how I've given multiple interpretations of the same method. put paralysed, paralysed, but two different ideas. The top student's language analysis reads like a discussion, okay? A discussion with themselves. It could mean this, could mean this. Look also how I have given multiple methods from the same quote. From that one quote, I've got sentences, I've got metaphor, and I've got the other metaphor of the paralysis, and then the frozen. So I've got three different types of methods. We've also got, say, that range of methods, multiple representatives from the same quote, but then also we are showing over the course of our answer that we can analyse a full range of methods. So here I've done figurative language and sentences. There's no prizes for guessing my next paragraph. I'm going to make sure I get some alliteration in there and make sure I get some word analysis in there. Okay? Now, we're going to do question 3, but while I'm talking about layers and focus, effect, links and so on, it is prudent to talk about question 4, because question 4, the approach to question 4 is virtually the same as question 2. If you can do question 2, you can do question 4. Okay? Question 4 is about language methods again, but it is also about non-language methods. Now, there are billions and billions of non-language methods, okay? But I'm going to talk to you about just three specific ones, because these are in every text I've ever read that AQA ever provided, okay? First of all, characterisation. Characterisation is any use of a character, okay? So here's a picture of the woman in black, there's our character. Kips, his name is. Second of all, is a symbol. A symbol is anything that could represent something else. And I think it's interesting that of all the things to talk about, there's a dog. The dog called Spider. What does a dog symbolise? Dog symbolises obedience, it symbolises loyalty, it symbolises a defence. Like, what does that tell us about the situation? And finally, pathetic fallacy. So that's any time they use the whether. Now, a writer will make these non-language choices to communicate a meaning just like language. That choice of that word communicates the meaning to the reader. The choice of that alliteration created a meaning to the gave a meaning to the reader. The choice of the whether also communicates the meaning to the reader, etc., etc. So, let's get to question 4. Here it is. It's a horrible looking question. Loads and loads of words. Don't stress. All you need to do is underline the hooks of the question. In amongst all of that gumph, there will be normally 2, sometimes 1, hooks for you to pin your answer on. The examiner wants to know how the writer has used methods to show that the person is nervous and the reader is therefore anxious about him. Everything comes back to that, nervous and anxiety. Now, I don't know what your question is going to be in your GCSE in the summer, but I do know that if you want to get a good mark, you're going to want to agree, but to evaluate, you show both sides. And it leads you towards that with that bit there, doesn't it? To what extent do you agree? If you go in and just give a one-sided argument, you are making it not impossible, but far harder to show your examiner the depth and the precision of your analysis and the quality of your evaluation. Okay? So you're going to agree, but. Now, once you know you're going to agree, but, you can now go and find your 3 rich quotes. But there's some rules to these quotes. Not like question 2, where you can just pick whichever ones you liked. These ones got some rules. You need 1 that agrees. You need at least 1 that disagrees. And you need to make sure somewhere in those 3 quotes, you've got at least 1 non-language choice. If you are limited, if you're cutting out any one of these from your quotes, you are straight away narrowing the marks that you could then achieve. Okay? So, here we go. Taking my little extract here. So it said go from line 14 to the end. This is the from line 14, and I'm just going to go as far as I can. Okay? Now, note how I've put agree in green and disagrees in red. Okay? Now, this is my thought process. This is how I went through. I let my eyes go to the rich quotes, because again, I need to find evidence and find quotes that I've got lots and lots to say about. So, when I was reading through, I was led initially to this one here. Silence, a seething, blanketing, almost tangible silence, and a musty darkness thick as felt. That's in green because it agrees, isn't it? That sounds about anxiety, that sounds like nerves, okay? But it's also got some nice sibilance in it. It's also got some nice metaphor in it. It's also got a simile in it. And we've got lots of nice things to say in that quote. I then look elsewhere. I've also got here, the moment I did so, spiders shot ahead. So again, I've got that idea of sibilance, and I've got shot is not actually been shot, figurative language. Heard a padding around, sniffing intently every closed door, still growling and grumbling. Again, some alliteration. And we've got some the verbs of the dog that was quite interesting. Of all the things the dog could be doing, it's grumbling and growling. But I'm also going to talk about the sentence there because it's quite long, and I've got some nice punctuation marks in there. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this is because in picking the quotes, you've got to think about your strategy. I said a minute ago that I need agree and disagree, and I also said a minute ago that I need language and non-language. I've not got a disagree yet, and I've not got any non-language, so I've got to make sure that I find a quote that disagrees, hence why it's in red, but also has some non-language choice in it. Of all the things to talk about, chooses moonlight, that's the weather, that's the environment, that's pathetic fallacy. And it also talks about beds. Beds can be a symbol, and for me, a bed is a symbol of comfort, peace, escapism, rest. That's not a symbol of nerves and anxiety. So I've got a quote that goes against the statement, but it's also full of some non-language choices for me to now analyse. Now, once I've got my quotes, that means I can now do my introduction. And again, if you're going to be a lower ability student that just does da-da-da-da-da, you are not going to do an introduction. If you have aspirations of doing very well, you are going to need an introduction. So, your introduction should read a bit like this. It's got to have, I agree, but. I agree to the extent the character is nervous, we should be anxious because it seems suffocated and damaged by the silence and the dog is in guard. But his discoveries lead to reassurance, he is alone and he discovers symbols of hope and reassurance. Can you see how I have used the quotes that I just found to shape my introduction? Because of those quotes I found that show that we agree that he's nervous and that we should be anxious, those are the points I'm going to make. And the final point I made about the moonlight, well, that shows that there's a symbol of hope. So your introduction should read a bit like a thesis. It should read a bit like a summary of the points you're going to go on to make. Okay? Now, we are on to our actual writing now. We're on to our proper little paragraphs. Okay? Now, you will be pleased to know this is virtually the same as question 2 now. First of all, we make a point. Question 2, in your point, you identify the method. In this one, question 2, you identify your opinion. Okay? So, you're in your opinion in agreement with the statement, we see how Kip seems overwhelmed, suffocated by the emptiness and silence of the house. For there was a, and then whack your evidence in. Nice rich quote. Point, evidence, same simple as. And now we are just going to do some layers again. Layer, 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 layer. Okay? Layer 1, there is our old friend, focus, effect, link. Focus, sibilance, here, echoes a threatening hissing sound, effect, reflecting the threat and danger Kip feels is in. Link back to the topic. Happy? No, I'm not. Next layer. Furthermore, the drawn out quiet S sound may also reflect the ongoing broken silence. Again, focus, effect, link. And again, focus, effect, link. I'm talking about pathetic fallacy now. And again, focus, effect, link. Talking about blanketing. And again, focus, effect, link. Another point about blanketing. The only limit is the time. I've got about 20 to 25 minutes to do question 4. How many layers can I get in? Okay? I got 5 in. That frees me up because next time I don't need to put 5 in every single time. Ronaldo isn't incredible every minute of the game. He saves it up, and when the moment is right, he is sublime. Same here. This quote set me up for 5 layers. My next quote, I might only have 2, but that's cool because I've shown the examiner I can already do it. I've already shown of writing methods, a precision in my analysis, the ability to layer up into detail, the chance of finding a perceptive comment amongst all the ideas that I've come up with. I've already done it. So it frees me up if I do this really well in my first paragraph. This is an excellent paragraph because we've shown we can take multiple interpretations from the same method. We've shown that we can consider non-language methods as well as language methods. We've shown that we can have a range of methods through our layers, layer, different selection of methods. And this is a really important point, we've shown we can agree but, even in our analysis, I talked at the start about how we can use our quotes to agree and but, and that is so important. But what a top student would also be able to do is within those quotes, within their analysis, they can also offer both sides. I've talked throughout here about how this shows that we agree that it's a very nerve-wracking moment. But he's talking about blanketing, and blanketing paints an image in my head as something warming and soothing and comforting. Well, that's not making me anxious. So see if you can juggle both of those two sides of evaluation, even in your analysis. Right, now we're going to step back in time and look at question 3. Now, question 3 is simple. People get terrified, but if you follow my 2 steps, my 2 little steps, you can get 7 or 8 marks out of 8 if you explain them and do them properly. Okay? Now, before we get on to them steps, let's really fathom what this question is asking us to do. First of all, it talks about referring to the whole source. So essentially, we need to talk about how the whole thing, the whole text works together to interest us. Now, if you think about your favourite book, your favourite film, you are interested in it because it makes you feel something. You feel something for the characters, you feel something for what's going on, okay? So therefore, this question is essentially saying, how does the whole text work together to make us think or feel a certain way, okay? 2 steps. Step 1, look at the start and the end, okay? Now, if you look at the start and the end, there can only possibly be 2 things. They'll either be the same or they'll be different. Now, in English world, got a fancy name for this. If they're the same, it's called a cyclical structure. The start is the same as the end, the start is the same as the end, it's a cyclical structure. Or, if they're different, that means there's been an epiphany, there's been a dramatic change. Let's have a look at Mice and Men as an example. For those that haven't seen Mice and Men, at the start, they're sitting by the river, talking about life, eating their beans, and talking about the rabbits they're going to have. By the end, they're talking about rabbits, again sitting by the river. It's a cyclical structure, and let me get shot. But it's a cyclical structure because it starts and ends at the river, okay? However, let's talk about Toy Story, and I find it very hard to talk about Toy Story. It makes me very emotional. Toy Story 3 is the only films that made me cry. At the start, we see imagination, we see colour, we see excitement, we see passion for his toys. At the end, he's giving his toys away to his neighbour. He doesn't want them anymore. There's been an epiphany. There's been a dramatic change in Andy. Okay? So we've got cyclical structure and epiphany. Let's do exactly the same thing with our GCSE text now. So we took the text, we take the start, we take the end. No particular science about where the start ends. Just take where you think the start ends, okay? Start and end, and look at them. And are they the same or are they different? Well, when I read the start and the end, I can see them talking about the dog, talking about the dog. I can see them talking about a noise and talking about the noise. I'm fairly happy this is a cyclical structure, that we've got the start reflected in the end, okay? So, now I'm ready to start writing. Now, the writing bit is different. We are now not talking about layers. We're now not talking about focus effect links, okay? And although I've got my 2 steps, both steps follow the same structure. I make a point, same as question 2, where I establish the method, except this case a structural method. I give my quote, and then I'm going to explain how it's been used at the start, and then explain how it's been used at the end. So I'm going to talk about the text as a whole each time. I'm not going to ever compartmentalise, in the beginning it does this and I feel like this, in the middle I feel like this and it does this. No, we're better than that. So we'll talk about it at the start, we'll talk about it at the end, and then we'll talk about how it makes the reader think or feel. So, in the beginning, the writer immediately establishes the terror and fear by focusing on the dog. And I've got my quote there. Let's explain how it's been used at the start. So the writer does this to make the reader aware from the outset the protagonist is in grave danger, and this uncharacteristic behaviour for a dog shows that both man and beast are vulnerable to a currently unknown danger, and they're withholding the details of that danger. So that's what's happening at the start. By the end, we see this is a cyclical structure because we also see Spider, the dog, also being whining, also being upset. So therefore, and the fact that we withheld the sound of the source mirrors how both Kips and Spider are in an inescapable cycle of fear. That cyclical structure throughout reflects the cycle of fear and pain they're unable to break free from. How does that make me feel? Well, I'm denied the same information as the characters, so therefore I'm as much in the dark as the protagonists, and therefore I understand their fear and their anxiety of the unknown. Okay? Cyclical structure. This is what it's doing at the start, this is what it's doing at the end, this is how it makes me feel. Bish bash bosh. Step 2. Step 2 is called symbolic development. Okay. Now, again, AQA love this. We talked a minute ago about our symbol of the dog, so we're going to use our symbol of the dog again here. Okay. For some reason, the dog's called Spider. Disgusting. Now, if I look at that symbol and how that symbol runs through the text, let's look at how our dog develops. Okay. So at the start, we've got our dog is ready to spring. He's ready to get involved. He's up for it. By the middle, our dog is a little bit perturbed now. Growling's growing louder, not very comfortable. By the end, we are whining a thin, pitiful, frightened moan. We see this dog digress or regress from someone who is brave and ready for it, ready to growl and ready to go for it, to someone who is broken at the end. Okay? So, same again. Let's establish our structural choice. Right, use symbolic development. Put our evidence. Look how I've done this evidence. 1, 2, 3. Those 3 little quotes that I just had a minute ago, I've just put in my one piece of evidence. Bang, bang, bang. Let's talk about the dog at the start. So on guard, ready to attack, mirroring how Kips feels, embrace the challenge and pursue the noise. And let's look at the end. The dog adopts actions that suggest weakness and vulnerability. Therefore, this emotional journey from aggression down to terror reflects the reader's emotional journey through the text, for our initial curiosity about the noise has evolved to deep concern and worry for the safety of Kips and the dog. 2 paragraphs, both of them have talked about how the text works together as a whole. Both of them have talked about how it shifts and shapes the reader's thoughts and feelings, and both of them have used quite ambitious ideas like cyclical structure and symbolic development. Remember, you're doing this compared to a lot of the country who are going, in the beginning the writer does this, makes me feel like this. In the middle the writer does this, it makes me feel like this. If you're talking about symbolic development and cyclical structures, you are light years ahead of where they are, okay? So follow these 2 steps, get your head around those 2 different approaches, and you'll be utterly fine in question 3, okay? Just to reiterate, there is no layers here, don't care. There is no language methods, the examiner don't care, and there is no focus effect link. So question 3 is the anomaly to the principles I talked about at the start, but don't worry, them principles come back with interest in paper 2, okay? Now, last one is narrative writing. Now, I've got a very particular strategy with narrative writing, which I'll do another video on over time, or if you're in my class, I'll teach you in my lessons, okay? So I've got a very specific strategy for it. In this first instance though, in this time where you're just going into it without a specific strategy, let's talk about the question as a whole. So question 5 is either write a story or describe normally. Sometimes they're crafty and have 2 describes or 2 stories, but it doesn't matter because both of them are exactly the same mark scheme. It doesn't matter what they say, they're being marked the same way. Now, let's talk about what that looks like. So the mark scheme, the mark is out of 40 and it's split into 2. The first bit is for 24 marks. For 24 marks is looking at your content, okay? So is your content engaging? Is it personal to you? Is it original? Is it a new idea? Have you used devices for effect? So not just bam, there's a simile, bish bash bosh, but have you used, in the same way you just analysed those methods and their purpose and their effect, have you then used them for their effect? Have you given depth? The biggest piece of little nugget advice I can give to you about question 5 is to go into depth, give detail about the trickle of the tear down his choke, down his throat. Show not tell. Let your reader see what's going on, not just hear what's going on. 3D senses, what can you see, smell, hear, feel, taste, touch, so the reader feels like they have this full 3-dimensional descriptive experience. And it doesn't matter if it's a story or a description, you do that, okay? Purposeful structure. We've just talked about structure, how it shifts the reader's emotions. Paragraph variety is tied into this big mark here. A hook to hook our reader in at the start, an impactful ending, okay? Now, I'll let you in a little bit into the strategy, a little teaser for going forward. I don't think it's very easy to do all these things in 40 minutes off the bat first time. It took J.K. Rowling 7 years to write Harry Potter. You're not going to be able to do those to a phenomenal standard without either an instinctive flair and ability for creative writing or a damn load of practice on a particular story you're going to write. I will share with you my story in another video, and I will share with you my annotations as to how it would shape all of these things, so that regardless of what the picture is, I can apply my strategy to something that is going to allow me to get to those top marks. Okay? In the short term though, these are the things you want to make sure you're including, and I'll be using them, I'll come back to those in a minute. I would be using them as a bit of a checklist. I'll be writing down the side, and as I'm going through my question 5, I'm ticking off and ticking off and ticking off what I've used, and then when I realise what I have not used, that means I can go back and add them as I go forward. Okay? The other thing you want to bear in mind is that the other 16 marks, it's the first time in your English language GCSE they get marks for the quality of your accuracy. Both your SPAG accuracy, spelling, grammar, punctuation, but then also for effect. Have you used sentences for an effect to vary your pace? Have you used punctuation for an effect? Not just that can I use them, but can I use them with purpose and with meaning? Okay? If you want to describe, I would recommend that you take your picture and you would go draw 2 circles, a bigger one and then a smaller one. And I would use that as the structure for my scripted writing. I would start off on the outside, I'd start off talking about everything around the edge, then I would move into the inner circle, and then I would move to the inside circle. This is a tricky picture because it's a doorknob. But if it was a person, you could zoom straight into that situation, into their mind, into their head, exploring their thoughts and their feelings. Okay? This is important because you've got to shift your reader. This examiner might have read 500 of these. If you don't shift his emotions or her emotions, if you just keep them stagnant and stale, they ain't going to give you a great mark. Okay? I'm not a massive fan of describing because it's very easy to get stagnant, to get stuck. It's very hard to shift your reader through a descriptive piece. Instead, I go by story, and I've already got in my head a structure of a story. There it's nice and calm at the start, long sentences, heavy punctuation, slow pace, images of peace, images of calm. Then by the middle, I'm taking out that punctuation, I'm elongating my sentences so it's going quicker and quicker. I'm changing my imagery so it is more violent, it is more dangerous. I'm shifting my reader on quicker with a more intense pace to the proceedings. By the end, it's minor sentences, 1 sentence per countdowns. It is real heavy bursts of emotive language. It is a split narrative of my little one that I've got. So I shift my structure around where it is going to turn on its head, and the examiner is going to realise how my start is part of a cycle towards the end, and how the whole thing is worked together into something that is a really effective piece. I've only got this structure because I've practiced it and practiced it and practiced it. I will share with you mine, I'll share with you my story, but I would strongly encourage you to think about what your narrative might be, so that when you go into your exam, you take the ideas from the pictures and apply it to a situation that shifts, gets more intense, gets quicker, gets more focused, gets more dangerous, gets more threatening, gets more violent as it moves through. Okay. Last thing I want to leave you with is time. Time is your enemy. I had a lad who I taught a few years ago, and sure he won't mind me telling this story, where in his January mocks he got a grade 1, and he got a grade 1 because he wouldn't stick to time. He wanted to get all his layers in, he wanted to get all his methods in, he wanted to get in all those things that he was really good at, that we had worked on together, and he got a grade 1. And we had a difficult conversation, and I said, please stick to your time, do exactly what you're doing, but when you get to 15 minutes, leave it, move on. When you get to 25 minutes, leave it, move on. The lad did it and got a grade 8. If you follow what I have taught you, and if you stick to your times, you can get any grade you want, 1 to 9, if you practice it and practice it and practice it and secure it so it's like second nature. Best of luck, I hope it goes well, and see you at the finish line.